according to those three metrics, we found that the greenest supermarkets are...
When I go to the supermarket, I try to be as eco-friendly as possible. I take plenty of tote bags. I walk to the store. I try and, shop local. But you and I, we shouldn't have to do all the work. The supermarket giants have a responsibility to cut their carbon footprint. But which grocer is greenest?
To find out, the Which team undertook a huge piece of research, pulling in data from public reports and directly from the supermarkets themselves. They compared the 11 biggest supermarkets on 3 eco-sins: greenhouse gas emissions, plastic, and food waste. The biggest category we looked at was greenhouse gas emissions, how these companies are directly contributing to global warming. To make sure we were fair to shops of all sizes, we compared their figures for greenhouse gas emissions adjusted for total revenue. These are what are called Scope 1 and 2 figures. That's CO2 generated by the businesses themselves and the energy they use. That doesn't include the farmers they buy food from or the importers who ship it across the world. But we don't have easily comparable data for this yet.
The German discounters did best on greenhouse gas emissions, but Lidl stood out for its goal of having net zero carbon emissions by this year. Bottom of the list was Iceland, scoring 5 out of a possible 25. Why? Perhaps the clue is in the name. Their famous freezers require a lot of electricity, and if that's coming from the national grid, it's going to produce a lot of carbon dioxide.
In fact, every pound spent in Iceland results in 4 times as much emissions as one spent in Aldi or Lidl. That said, Iceland told us that they buy 100% renewable electricity for their UK sites. Ocado also does poorly, perhaps due to its particular business model. Its delivery-only service means its fleet of trucks racks up a big carbon tyre print. Meanwhile, Tesco is so large that despite its greenhouse gas emissions being fairly average, its stores are responsible for 1% of all of our country's electricity demand. Plastics were our second major category, representing a 1-2 punch to the environment. They cost energy to produce, and they use landfill space if not recycled. The Plastic Intensity Score is a measure of tons of plastic placed on the UK market per million grocery items sold.
Waitrose uses the least amount of plastic for the number of groceries that it sells. Take this mince for example, plastic bag rather than a rigid tray.
However, it was the Co-op that won in the overall category, thanks to the fact that 94% of its own brand packaging can be recycled at household collections.
Again, bottom of the pack was Iceland, and with big hunks of plastic like this, it's not hard to see why. But they have a plan. They want to remove plastic from all of their own brand products and replace it with things like this cardboard packaging by next year.
Finally, we looked at food waste. If global food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases, so this is a vital area to get right. Again, our food waste intensity score measures the amount of food waste generated as a proportion of total food sales. Top of the list was Ocado, which let only 0.04% of its food go to waste. It claims that its shorter supply chain, where customers are served directly from warehouses, allows products to last longer. And even the food that does need to be chucked is redistributed. Some food even goes to feed the animals at Twycross Zoo. Marks & Spencer was bottom of the list because they were unable to provide the data in a comparable format. Otherwise, Aldi and Lidl were the biggest culprits here. The latter claiming it's because they sell relatively more fresh items than their rivals do. So, we've crunched the numbers, and according to those 3 metrics, we found that the greenest supermarkets are Waitrose and Lidl. Lidl stood out for its great greenhouse gas emissions and its relatively low use of plastic, whereas Waitrose was consistently good across the board. Iceland, on the other hand, needs to try harder. It was really behind the others in the group thanks to its high plastic use and high greenhouse gas emissions. This was a huge bit of research and gives consumers some of the information that you need to make an environmentally conscious decision about where you shop. However, there's so much more we couldn't take into consideration. For example, supply chains contribute massive amounts of carbon in transportation and production, but so too does farming and fishing. Farming can cause deforestation and use a huge quantity of water. We've also not looked at rates of organic production, biodegradable cleaning products, or sustainable fish, although some of those decisions can be made by you, the consumer, already. An M&S spokesperson said, "Which is just one industry benchmark based on certain criteria, which doesn't reflect Marks & Spencer's commitment to building a sustainable future." She said M&S aimed to make all food packaging recyclable by the end of this year, and added it had donated 34 million meals to charity since 2015. So, next time you're heading out to the shops, remember that you have the power to influence the retail giants and help them make better, greener choices for the future. If you're interested in food waste, watch the video below. I eat nothing but discarded food for a whole week.